So today I'm going to show you how to add crimp covers onto crimps. So I'm using quite large ones. These are crimp covers that will become 4mm beads, and this is a bracelet I made. It's a spacer bracelet, so there's lots of crimps on there. I've already added some crimps either side of some of the beads to show you the effect. So crimp covers can be used to hide crimps, so that's what it'd look like without the crimp cover, and then with the crimp cover. The crimps covers give extra detail, a bit of extra colour. They come in a whole range of colours and sizes. These are 4mm. I would probably use 3mm normally for this style of bracelet. I'm using larger ones, so hopefully it's more visible on the video of how to do it. They also come in a range of materials. These are just plated. I've used sterling silver before. They are the easiest ones I've ever come across to use. These are trickier just because the metal is harder to use. So eventually they, once you've put them on, they can give a sphere or ball-like appearance. Now, anybody who's tried these before or who does jewellery making will tell you that they are one of the most hardest things to do in jewellery making, and they are actually the bane of my life, and I very rarely use crimp covers in a design like this. I use crimp covers when covering a knot on an elasticated bracelet. That's pretty much the only time I will use it. Otherwise, when making a bracelet, if I knew the crimps are going to be exposed, I would choose really small crimps, so they're barely visible, like down to 1mm, or I would make sure that all my crimps are crimped exactly the same way, just so it looks more decorative with the crimps rather than having to go through the process of these. However, for this video, I shall show you how to attach crimp covers. So, also knowing when making this bracelet I was going to attach crimp covers, I've made it so the bead slides a little bit, so there's space either side of the bead for the crimp cover to, so it can cover the bead, so cover the crimp. So you take your bracelet, and this is how I do it. Everybody will have different ways. So I just hook it on so that the opening of the crimp is basically eating up the crimp cover. I don't know if that's very clear. And then I'm going to take my pliers, and then how I do it, I crush both sides together first, then that starts to get a bit of movement on the crimp cover. And then the next stage you have to do really slowly, back and forth, back and forth. I then put my pliers on top, I don't know if it's visible or not, of the crimp cover, and I give it a little squeeze. I then go from underneath and give it a little squeeze. Now at the moment there's a gap between the two edges of the crimp, so we want to try and eliminate that gap. And so sometimes you might need to squeeze from one side more than the other. You might need to just crushing down the middle might work, down the centre, sorry, of the closure. I know I've got it pretty much closed, but it's a little bit not quite spherical enough, so I'm just going to try and manipulate the metal a little bit. So I'm going to give it a squeeze on front, sorry, where the closure is, to try and make it more round. So that one is probably the best. I'm going to get that, so I'm happy with that. So I shall show you again on the next one. So I take my crimp cover, hold it with my fingers, and then slide the crimp, so the crimp is sitting inside the crimp cover. And then I'm going to take the pliers and I'm going to crush both the sides of the crimp, opposite sides of the crimp cover together to bring the edges closer. So again, I've got a gap in the top of my crimp cover, so I'm going to work one side and then the other side, so top and then bottom, of just trying to make it so the edges meet and then give it a clean finish. You might find you might crush it too far on one side or the other. I'm quite happy with that one, that would do. And therefore basically the sides of the crimp cover overlap. There's not a lot you can do about that really. You either start again or you just accept that that is how that crimp cover is going to look. So I've crushed the sides together, so I've got the edges pointing upwards, and then going to squeeze it a little bit on the front and then one side. And the other difficulty of crimp covers is they like to move around a lot in your hands, so and especially in this sort of design, there's not a lot to grip hold of and to hold steady. So I just add the last one onto this bracelet. Yeah, so you can get them from 2mm, I think it is, up to, I don't know what the largest crimp cover you can get. So these are 4. I've definitely seen them in 5mm, and then that might be the largest, I don't know. But then to be fair, if you're going that size, you'll probably find a bead with a hole that could possibly, you could somehow hide the crimp under it anyway, so you wouldn't necessarily need a crimp cover, so you wouldn't put yourself through this process of fighting with crimp covers. Right. So there we go, that's our finished bracelet with crimp covers hiding the crimps.